Hello and welcome back to Denmark 101. Today you've been such a good audience, let's get married. Or at least let's talk about Danish wedding traditions. So they're actually quite different than what I'm used to in the US. Part of that is because this is an evangelical Lutheran country, but coming from the US, when I hear evangelical or I hear Lutheran, I think of a more strict and perhaps more extreme version of the faith than you find here. Here it's quite relaxed in many ways, and the focus, the emphasis is very different. Now, part of that starts with the structure of many of the churches. So in many of the churches, it's actually a square structure. So when you think of a church in the shape of a cross, that's not what you find. That changes a lot of the dynamics as far as perhaps how the bride enters. Some of the logistical considerations, but where the first really big difference is typically you'll have the priest at the altar, and then you'll have the bride and groom, and then one person accompanying each, sitting in chairs opposite of each other. So you'll have two chairs, and then the priest up here, and then you'll have all of the wedding attendees there surrounding them. Now that ends up being very different already, because you really only have those four people that are there. They sit through the ceremony, and the ceremony is quite different because it consists of a lot of hymns and not ums, but some hymns with singing, which are absolutely beautiful. And all of the people in the pews sing along. The bride and groom potentially also sing along. And so you go through this series where the priest will talk a little bit about marriage, about the wedding, about the couple, and then interspersed into that are the hymns. And it's the ones that I've experienced so far have been very positive. I'm very much focused on the people getting married, whereas quite often in the U.S. I think it tends to go the other way, a little bit more fire and brimstone, or kind of taken as a opportunity to promote the church. And here it's very much about the people. It's very much about the moment and creating a special moment that then is, I suppose you could say, before God. So the song, the music, that side of it is really wonderful and really special. At the very beginning, the bride is typically outside, has not arrived yet. That's similar. The groom will be there and he'll be waiting with his best man. But then everybody that arrives at the church, they'll go and he will greet each and pretty much every single one of them before they're then seated. She then enters and then will sit across from him. The ceremony proceeds, and then at the conclusion of the ceremony, they go up, they say their vows, perhaps exchange the ring, they return, and then they sit as a couple. So now they're married and they're there together, which is a very cool piece of symbolism. They'll also typically, when they go up to take their vows, they take their knees, take a knee. So both are then kneeling in front of the priest. They exit, and then once they're standing on the front steps of the church, then everybody, one or two at a time, comes and greets them, and then you usually get bombarded with rice and cake and stuff like that. But then the reception is where things get particularly interesting. So you arrive at the reception, and wherever that might be, you have everybody there, and then, of course, nobody sits, and very importantly, nobody sits until the bride and groom arrive and either tell everyone to be seated or take their seat. And then that's when the fun really kicks off. Because now that they're wed, there are two really entertaining traditions. And the first is that when you clink or clank on your glass or the table, anything up here, the bride and the groom, they have to get up on their chair and they have to kiss while standing up on their chairs. And then if you under your feet, underneath the table. They need to go under the table and kiss, typically accompanied with all sorts of oohs and ahs and applause from the wedding reception group. The other is that, well, after, it's a Danish wedding, so usually there's some beer and some wine involved. And so then typically when the bride or the groom leaves the wedding table, that is your opportunity, and you're expected as a man or as a woman to go and give the bride or groom, whoever's left, a kiss on the cheek. So of course, if it's the groom, then all of the women in the reception will then come up and give him a kiss. And if it's the bride, then all of the men will form a little line until he returns, and then everyone returns to their seat. Both of those are really fun kind of elements to it. You also have a mixture of toasts and singing, which takes place. So it's not purely the conventional toast, but everybody will either burst out into song in line with one of the songs, a custom written song, or usually done to some traditional hymns or lyrics and things like that. So the end result is a very fun, relaxed, exciting wedding reception that has some really cool quirks. And then the grand finale happens with the wedding waltz, or the final waltz, which typically I believe has to happen or should happen before midnight. The bride and the groom, they take the dance floor and they dance, and then everybody starts to slowly close in on them and close in on them and close in on them until they're completely smashed and they can't move. And then the groom is lifted up into the air by a lot of his best men, and then they pull off his shoes, take out scissors, pull his socks carefully, hopefully they haven't had too many beers, and then snip the toes off of both of his socks. Then typically also they will take his tie, whatever the tie may be, if he has a tie, maybe bow tie, and cut that. And then in some instances, if she has a veil, they will then cut that as well. And that's an old tradition that I guess supposedly has to do with a test for her new wifely sewing skills. So you see the tie cutting and the veil cutting a little bit less, but it is not a Danish wedding if he has not had his shoes pulled off and his socks trimmed. I'm sure I've lost or left out a couple, depending. I know there's a lot of Danes watching and following the series. Post your traditions, post what I've missed or what I've misconstrued in a comment. And otherwise, thank you for sharing this video. Thank you for sharing this series. Thank you for your likes and for subscribing. I absolutely love the feedback that this series has gotten so far. So thank you and stay tuned. More videos coming soon.